Welcome to Chapter 6. In this chapter, we're going to talk more about understanding our consumers and how marketers can provide value to those consumers. In this chapter, we're going to cover four important marketing strategies that are all designed to ultimately provide the best value possible to your customers. We're going to talk about segmentation. We're going to talk about targeting. We're going to talk about differentiation, and we're going to talk about positioning. Each of these four components of marketing strategy, excuse me, segmentation, targeting, differentiation, and positioning, are all combined together to ultimately create value for your customers. And it's important that each of these four things happen in a strategic, deliberate, and conscientious way so that the company that you're working for as a marketer can provide that superior customer value to your target audience and ultimately help the organization achieve its goals. So what do we mean when we say segmentation? This is an excellent exam question, by the way. Segmentation means you take a look at all of the possible customers for your product category and you break them up into smaller, more meaningful groups. So for example, it could be you're looking at the market of people who consume coffee, or it could be the market of people who drive their own motor vehicles, or it could be the market of people who are into practicing yoga. Those are the populations or the markets, consumer markets for a particular product. And then once you have that broad consumer market, there are four segmentation strategies that you can use to break up that big consumer market into smaller, more manageable groups. And the four ways are through geographic segmentation, demographic segmentation, psychographic segmentation, and behavioral segmentation. And our next several slides will go into those each in more detail, but this is an excellent exam question. What are the four segmentation strategies, and how might a company use one or more of these strategies to provide value for their customers through their segmentation strategy? A company doesn't need to choose just one of these segmentation strategies. They can actually choose more than one, but for the purposes of our discussion, we're going to look at them each individually and separately. So the first two segmentation strategies that we're going to talk about are geographic and demographic segmentation. Very quickly, geographic segmentation involves dividing a broad consumer market into different smaller groups based on geographical units. Those units could be at the country level, at the state or provincial level, at the regional level, by counties, by cities, or even by neighborhoods. And I'm going to give you some examples in just a few minutes. Demographic segmentation divides a consumer market into different subgroups or subsections or segments based on variables, demographic variables such as age, life cycle, stage, gender, income, occupation, educational level, etc. And it's important to understand that these two types of segmentation strategies, geographic and demographic segmentation, are actually by far the most common segmentation strategies used by organizations. And the reason organizations choose to use these demographic and geographic segmentation strategies is because they are actually easier. They're not very good, or they're not as good comparatively to the other two that we're going to talk about in a minute, but geographic and demographic segmentation is relatively easy to do. The data around geographic segmentation and demographic segmentation is relatively easy to get, even for small companies that have limited resources, and therefore those are the reasons why these are the two segmentation strategies that are most commonly used. They are, however, not the most effective. Geographic segmentation, again, involves dividing up your consumer markets into smaller geographic units, such as nations, states, countries, regions, cities, and neighborhoods. For example, Domino's headquarters, corporate Domino's, the pizza restaurant, They may decide to develop marketing strategies that target specific countries. So they may have a strategy for Canada. They may segment their market based on Canada, and a separate segment is the US, and another segment might be Europe. They also could segment their market regionally. So within Canada, a company like Domino's Canada, the Canadian headquarters, could segment the market based on region. So we could have a unique segment of being the Atlantic provinces, one segment being Quebec, one segment being Ontario, one segment being the Prairie provinces, and another segment being the Western provinces. But if you're an individual Domino's franchise owner, and let's say you own the Domino's franchise that's located on University Avenue near HomeSense and Shoppers Drug Mart and Starbucks, you're probably not going to segment your markets based on country or region. You're likely going to segment your market based on neighborhoods, even, or cities, something that sort of is within your reach. Who are the people that geographically you are able or most likely to serve? So those are just some examples, and it really depends on the nature of your business and geographically who are the customers that you are most likely to be able to provide your products and services to. Now, in a global context, when you have an online business, the geographic segmentation strategy actually changes quite dramatically, because you may be an online retailer located in PEI, but because your business is online, you may actually have an ability to reach consumer markets around the world. So online businesses or e-businesses actually have a very different type of geographic segmentation strategy compared to what we call bricks and mortar businesses that have a physical presence, and their ability to serve a consumer market is defined by the physical proximity to that market. We often hear about demographic segmentation in marketing because it is the most common, it's the easiest, and it's the most generalizable. It's easy to do, and it's not that it's completely ineffective. There is a level of effectiveness to demographic segmentation, otherwise companies wouldn't do it. But the challenge with demographic segmentation is that it assumes all people within certain demographic categorizations behave in the same way. So, for example, if you segment your consumer markets based on gender, male and female, assuming that we only have two genders, which of course we don't necessarily believe and understand that to be the way genders are represented in this day and age. However, for the sake of argument, let's assume we're talking about male and female consumers. If you segment your market that way, what you're saying is that all female consumers behave in a similar manner, and all male consumers behave in a similar manner. And we know that simply is not true. The amount of diversity and uniqueness and individualization within those genders is actually quite broad, and so it's important to understand that when you use demographic segmentation, you are making fairly broad generalizations, which in this day and age actually are often not true or valid any longer. So you can segment the market, for example, by age. You can segment the market, children or teenagers or young adults or sort of middle-aged adults and more senior adults. So you could segment the market that way, and for some products, that may make a lot of sense. So, for example, if you're selling geriatric vitamin supplements, you're probably not too interested in targeting teenagers and young adults, but you probably are interested in targeting senior citizens. And so you may choose to segment your market that way. You can also segment the market based on where you are in your life cycle. So you may target, newlyweds. You may target families with young children. You may target empty nesters, people whose children have just moved out of the house. You may choose to target retirees. And so you can look at people's stage of their life cycle and target people that way as well. Again, you can target people based on gender. Again, this one is becoming increasingly more complicated because our understanding and appreciation of gender is evolving quite rapidly right now, but certainly segmenting markets based on gender has been very common historically. You can segment the market based on income level. So, for example, if you are a BMW car dealership, you may very well want to segment your market based on income level because the likelihood of people being able to purchase or even being interested in purchasing your type of vehicle, BMW, is dependent on their income level. So you may want to segment the market that way. So there's all kinds of different examples of various demographic characteristics that may represent a good and reasonable segmentation strategy for a company. The next two types of segmentation strategies, psychographic segmentation and behavioral segmentation, are less commonly used by marketers, although their usage is increasing significantly. And the reason they're less likely to be used is because it requires a significant amount of data about your consumers in order to be able to segment consumers based on both psychographic and behavioral segmentation. The reason why these two types of segmentation are increasing is because marketers now have access to enormous amounts of data about consumers, largely as a result of consumers' online consumer activity. So they do things like monitor our social media activities. They develop incentives where we as consumers allow companies to collect information about us. And because we're allowing them to do that, they're able to gather this information. It's called big data, and they're able to use that information for more advanced segmentation strategies. Psychographic and behavioral segmentations, while they're not used as commonly as geographic and demographic segmentation, again, they are increasing. But if you are able to use psychographic and behavioral segmentation, it is way more effective than the other two, geographic and demographic. If you're able to segment your markets using psychographic characteristics or behavioral characteristics, you'll find that the results are much more effective. Marketers segment their markets using psychographic segmentation based on things like social class, lifestyle. So, say for example, you are Jeep. The Jeep car manufacturer is a type of a brand that targets people based on lifestyle. So, if you're the kind of person who likes, off-roading, being in the wilderness, those sorts of activities, then Jeep might be a good brand or fit for you as a consumer. Even brands like Lululemon, for example, target people based on lifestyle. They're looking for people who are active or who want to connect with the active, often yoga, but not strictly yoga, lifestyle. You can also segment the market psychographically using personality characteristics. So some brands do psychographic analysis of the personalities of their target markets and target consumers based on those personalities. So a lot of the products that people buy are actually very much tied to or reflect their individual style, their personality, their lifestyle. And so psychographic segmentation can work really, really well, provided you're able to access the data. The last of the 4 segmentation strategies is called behavioral segmentation. There's a bunch of different types of behaviors that can be used as segmentation strategies. You can segment audiences based on the occasion. So, for example, you can segment your target market based on the time of year. So, the holiday season is coming up in a few months. And so many companies or businesses will develop marketing campaigns tied to people who are doing their holiday shopping, for example. The whole pumpkin spice latte craze that started with Starbucks and now is literally everywhere is very much an occasion-based segmentation strategy. They're targeting people who are welcoming in the autumn season with something that is familiar and comfortable and enjoyable for them and that they associate with this particular time of year. You can also segment the market using behavioral segmentation based on the benefits that the consumers seek from their product. Right? The benefits that the consumer seeks from their product. So, if you're an automobile manufacturer, you may have a segment of your potential market who are really interested and motivated by fuel efficiency. They're looking for a vehicle that has incredibly high gas mileage because they're really concerned about fuel consumption in their vehicle. Other consumers of your brand of vehicles may be more concerned with safety, or another segment might be more concerned with performance. Another segment might be more concerned with sort of style and the appearance of the car. So you can actually segment markets based on the specific benefits that groups of consumers are seeking when they buy that particular product category. Other types of behavioral segmentation include segmenting consumers based on their user status. So, targeting people who have never used your product, targeting people who used to use your product but don't use it anymore, targeting people who are um, potential users of your product. They fit your target market quite well, but they don't currently use your product. You can target people or segment people based on first time usage. And so you may have a marketing strategy that's designed specifically to get people to come in for the first time and incentivize those first time users. Or you can segment the market based on regular users, people who already use your product. They're your existing customers. You can segment the markets behaviorally using usage rates. So, how much of your product do they purchase on a regular basis? So, you can get people who are light users, they buy your product occasionally, but not necessarily all the time. You can get medium users, or you can get heavy product users. So, for example, with Starbucks, I would be considered a heavy product user because I go to Starbucks every single day, 7 days a week, 12 months of the year for the past 10 years. Other people may go to Starbucks maybe 2 or 3 times a week, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a month. And so they'd be considered more medium users. They use Starbucks, they use it sort of on a regular basis, but not necessarily on a daily basis. And then, of course, you have your light Starbucks users, people who might come in maybe once a month to meet up with a friend over a cup of coffee, or they're not regular users. They do come in on occasion to purchase from Starbucks, but they're not regular users. And lastly, you can segment your markets behaviorally using loyalty status. So you may have people who buy your product regularly, but will switch to a different brand if they're incentivized to do so. Those people are your regular customers, but they're easily convinced to switch brands if they're incentivized to do that. So maybe the competing brand offers a sale price or a special promotion that draws your customer away from you. Other customers are incredibly loyal and wouldn't change brands even with a significant incentive uh, that may convince other people to change. Your loyal customers won't change their affiliation with your brand. So I would be considered, for example, a super loyal Starbucks customer. It doesn't matter what Tim Hortons does. I'm not changing brands. I like Starbucks. I'm incredibly loyal. But other people may flip back and forth between different brands depending on the particular marketing strategy that a brand is using at a given time. So, why do companies bother segmenting the consumer market into smaller groups? Well, they do so because smaller groups are easier to target. It's easier to develop marketing campaigns, marketing strategies that target smaller groups rather than larger groups. Segmentation also helps businesses to identify and better understand who their customers are. And obviously, the more they understand who exactly their customers are, the better they can develop marketing strategy to appeal to them. And you can ultimately reach customers more efficiently by tailoring your marketing offerings, your marketing strategy, or your 4Ps, and your messaging to meet specific customer needs rather than be sort of broad and generic and not focused. Segmentation systems ultimately help marketers segment people and locations into more marketable groups of like minded consumers. And it just helps marketers do a better job if they segment the markets and do it well. It's possible to segment any market any way you want to. That doesn't mean you should do it. You should only segment your markets into smaller groups if those smaller groups meet these 5 criteria. This is a good exam question. In order to segment markets, or in order to make it a worthwhile activity for a company to do, you must be able to measure each of your segments. And so by measure, it means how big is are the number of people in this particular subsection or subsegment of the market. How much money do they spend? How much money do they have? What are some of the fundamental characteristics about this segment of your market? They have to be accessible. There has to be a means for you to communicate with them, with this subsection or the sector of your consumer group. You have to be able to reach them. They have to be accessible. That the segment has to be big enough or substantial enough to warrant its own segmentation strategy. If the segment is not big enough, there's not enough people in it, then it makes no sense to develop a specific marketing strategy for a small group of people if that doesn't make a lot of sense. The groups must be differentiatable. You must be able to distinguish if you're going to break people up into different segments. The different segments have to be different, and they have to be different in meaningful ways. The groups have to be different enough that they would benefit from unique or different marketing strategies. And they have to be actionable. There has to be some things that you can do in your 4P marketing strategies that will appeal specifically to this segment or group that you're targeting. Students often get segmenting and targeting confused. Segmenting is, again, breaking up a consumer market into smaller, meaningful groups that are different from each other. Once you've done that, then your job is to pick which one of those groups, it could be more than one, but which of those groups are you as a company actually going to target and tailor your marketing strategy to meet those particular customers' needs. The reality is you're not going to target every market segment that you identify. You're going to pick and choose the ones that represent the best opportunity for your company to provide value to and to create meaningful customer relationships with. So targeting is the process of evaluating the various market segments that you just created in the segmentation phase, and then figuring out, based on segment size and potential for growth, based on the segment's overall attractiveness to you and your company and your brand and your products, and based on your company's objectives and resources and goals, you'll pick which one of those segments or which of those segments you're going to actually develop a specific marketing strategy for. You're not going to do it for everybody. You're going to target some of the groups that you just identified in the segmentation strategy through your targeting. Here are 4 broad market targeting strategies. There's the undifferentiated or mass marketing targeting strategy. This is where your target markets are so broad and it's so difficult to reach them on a segment level that you actually just develop a marketing strategy, the 4Ps of marketing, to appeal to everyone with the full recognition that some people who you're targeting with your mass marketing strategy will never become customers of yours. You know there's going to be a lot of waste in your marketing activities, but you accept that because the cost of being more targeted or more specific is too much. So companies like like grocery stores or like the Walmarts of the world, they often use uh, mass or undifferentiated marketing because the cost of being more targeted in their marketing campaign outweighs the benefits. And so, for some companies that have lots of resources, they choose to do mass marketing because to them the cost benefit analysis just makes sense. Other companies that have more limited resources choose a differentiation marketing strategy where they actually develop specific 4P strategies for each of the segments that they are deciding to focus on and target. Um, this is becoming, again, increasingly popular because companies have now more and more access to information and data to allow them to do that. Concentrated or niche marketing is really narrowing down and being very, very specific about exactly who it is you're going to go after. It's not sort of a general subgroup. It's a very, very specific group of people who you're going to develop your marketing strategy for. So concentrated niche marketing, for example, is maybe where you use salespeople who develop specific one-on-one relationships with a very, very targeted uh, audience. And the last kind of targeting strategy is micro or individualized marketing. And this is becoming increasingly popular, again, because of access to data that companies have today that they didn't have a generation ago. We're starting to see companies that have the ability to create specific marketing messages tied to an individual based on an individual's specific needs and wants. For example, when I go on to Indigo's website, I get specific messages to me based on my previous search history and purchases at Indigo. That is a type of micro marketing. Not everyone sees the same message. Only I get that particular message from Indigo, and it's based on an algorithm that they use to target me specifically based on my past behavior. Even companies, huge companies like Amazon, who absolutely do some undifferentiated marketing as well, Amazon is increasingly doing micro marketing. So when I make a purchase from Amazon, it's not uncommon for me to receive marketing communications from them that are tied to my past purchases. It's a message directly targeted at me, individualized for me and my particular needs, again, as determined by an algorithm that Amazon uses. And so we're seeing more and more of this micro marketing because companies now have more and more access to the data that allows them to do this. When choosing a targeting strategy, there's a few things that you want to think about. Your company's resources. And resources don't necessarily just mean money, but money is certainly an important factor. How much money can the company spend on developing marketing strategies to meet the various targets that you want to focus on? But it's also other resources, such as data, like I was just talking about, or expertise, the people in the organization who can enable you to effectively target specific segments of the population. So company resources is important. Product variability. If you only make one product and every customer buys the exact same product and there's very little variability in the product and the product's benefits, then it may not make sense to separate people too much or segment them too much because it's one product, it's the same product. It may not make sense to have multiple marketing strategies for the same product. You want to think about the product's life cycle. If a product's early in its life cycle, it's just been introduced into the marketplace and it has lots of potential for growth, you may want to invest very strategically in good targeting strategies. But if the product's at the end of its product life cycle, meaning it's in its dying days, it's not going to last much longer, there's not a ton of future potential for this product category, it may not make a lot of sense to invest in a targeting strategy. Market variability. How different are the different market segments? And if they're different but not all that different, it may not make sense to invest the resources in developing unique marketing strategies for each of those different market segments. And you may also want to think about your competitors' marketing strategy. Who are they targeting? Does it make sense to try and target the same people, or does it make more sense to try and target different people? And so, again, depending on the business and depending on the competitors, that will determine what your answer to those questions might be. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about social responsibility when it comes to target marketing. We're increasingly becoming aware that some market segmentation and targeting strategies are inherently racist and sexist. I'm not suggesting that the it's a consciousness that people are consciously deciding to be racist or sexist in their segmentation or targeting strategies, but it's happening nonetheless. There's decisions being made about consumers that are inherently racist and sexist, and we are increasingly finding that that is no longer acceptable in the marketplace. That consumers are demanding that racist and sexist behavior um, is no longer tolerable to mainstream stream consumers, and companies that practice these sorts of things, again, whether it's deliberately or whether it's inadvertently, uh, they can expect to be called out by their consumers and demand change and demand uh, experience demands for change. The last two concepts that we want to talk about in this chapter are differentiation and positioning. And this again these two concepts are again things that sometimes students get a little bit confused or mixed up, and it's important to understand that they are in fact a little bit different. Differentiation is a strategy that's employed to figure out ways to make your product different in meaningful ways from the competition. Positioning in comparison is the way consumers think about your particular product and brand. It's the position that the brands occupy in the minds of consumers. So, an easy way to do this is if we were to talk about fast food restaurants like McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King and all the other fast food sort of burger type restaurants, and I asked you to describe each one using various adjectives like that you think apply to specifically to each of those restaurants, the way we describe those restaurants is the position of those brands in the minds of consumers. This is just a little visual representation of a positioning map. In this case, it's for luxury SUVs. Basically, for a positioning map on a piece of paper, you choose two important variables that are relevant to your product category. And so in this case, they chose luxury and they chose performance as being two important variables in the luxury SUV market. And what they did was they plotted each of the brands or products that fit the luxury SUV category on this map relative to luxury and performance. And so what the purpose of this map helps you understand the position your product or your brand occupies in the minds of consumers. And when you do this, you can see based on what other brands are most closely uh, geographically linked to you on the positioning map, those are the brands that are most likely in direct competition with you. If we were in a real class together in person, I have a little exercise that I do with students where we create a positioning map and we do it for pizza restaurants. And we evaluate the pizza restaurants in Charlottetown based on price and quality. So I get students to draw on a piece of paper a map with an x-axis and a y-axis. On one of the axes, we put low price and high price. And on the other axis, we put low quality and high quality. And then we put on this map all the different pizza restaurants in Charlottetown. So we include Domino's, we include Famous Peppers, we include Piatto's, we include Little Caesars, Little Cristo's, Jack's Pizza, all the different pizza restaurants, and we plot them on the map. And the purpose of doing this, again, is to better understand where your brand is positioned on the map. Is it considered to be low price, high quality, low price, low quality, high price, low quality, or high price, high quality? And again, once you have the map, if you look at your own brand in comparison to the brands closest to it on the map, those are who are likely to be your closest competition. On a piece of paper or on a computer screen, we can only use two variables. In this case that's on your screen now, we're looking at luxury and performance. If, however, you have a computer simulator, you can actually have more than two dimensions. You can do three dimensions, and in some sophisticated, using some sophisticated software, you can actually even do more than three dimensions and map your brand and your competitors' brands in the same product category on a multi-dimensional map. This is a really useful tool. This little chart helps identify or sort of visualize how you choose a different differentiation and positioning strategy. The first thing you need to do is identify the set of ways that your product is different in meaningful and positive ways than the competition. How is your product different than the competition's product in the similar category? And it has to be objective. So I've had this conversation with people who run the business is no longer in operation, but they ran a pizza restaurant downtown. And I asked them one day, so what makes your pizza different than all the other pizza restaurants in town? And their response was, well, our pizza tastes better. Well, I've tasted their pizza and it was fine, but it certainly wasn't the best pizza in town. So it's not enough to have subjective differences. They have to be objective. Now, obviously, preference in pizza is subjective, and some people are going to prefer certain types of pizzas over others, and so it's not always easy to do this, but you want to try to use as objective criteria as possible. You want to figure out what competitive advantages are right for your business. You can't be better at your competition at absolutely everything. And so you want to pick and choose which advantages that you want to focus on to provide value to your customers. And obviously, you want to pick those things that you think your customers are going to most value in your product. And then once you do that, then that will determine your overall positioning strategy. There are dozens and dozens of different ways to develop a competitive advantage, but some of the most common ones that we think of are a price advantage, meaning your product is a lower price than the competition, or that your product provides more benefits or value than the competition. Those are two of the most common ways that you can create a competitive advantage: to have lower prices or to provide more value. But other ways that a company can differentiate themselves, you can do so in terms of your product and the product features and benefits derived from the product. It could be in the services associated with the product. It could be in the channels of distribution. You may choose different or unique channels of distribution that provide value to your customers. It could be based on the people that you're targeting. Who your target audience is may be different than the competition. The products are actually more or less the same, but the people that you target are different. Or it could be about branding or imaging, that you find a way to differentiate yourself from your competition. Choosing the right competitive advantages is really important. You want to have a number of ways in which you are different and develop a unique selling proposition or value proposition for each of your brands, and you want to stick to that. Once you develop a differentiation strategy or a positioning strategy for your brand, you want to stick to that and be as consistent as humanly possible in your marketing to ensure that there's no confusion among your customers. When deciding which types of differences you want to choose and promote for your brand, you want to focus on things that are important to your customers. So, for example, one of the ways UPEI School of Business is different than other schools of business in the Atlantic region is the walls in our classrooms are a light green color. And if you were to go to Dalhousie or St. Mary's or Mount St. Vincent, for example, the colors of the walls in the classroom are different. Some of them are more like a taupey gray or an off-white or a light brown. Yes, the two things are different, but the reality is that is not important to people. No one cares, and so just because you're different doesn't mean you're different in a way that's important to people, to your customers. So it's not just that you're different, it has to be different in a way that is important. It has to be distinctive. It has to be different in a meaningful and significant way. It can't just be a tiny little bit different. It has to be different in a significant way, distinctive. It has to be superior. You may be different, but it may be for a negative reason, not for a positive reason. So you want to make sure the ways in which you are different are positive, not negative. There has to be a way for you to communicate with your target audience about the ways in which you're superior. So there has to be a method for you to communicate that difference to your customers. You want your difference to be preemptive. It means you want it to be a deliberate, conscious choice for you to be different in this way. You don't want to be reactive. You don't want to be sort of uh, backed into a corner to try to figure out ways that you're different. You as the company want to make the strategic choice of how you're going to be different. The differences have to be affordable. If the fact that your product is different causes it to now be priced so high that your target customers can't buy your product anymore, they can't afford it, that's not a good way to be different. It also has to be profitable for you as the business. You can't be different in such a way that makes your product and your product offering unprofitable in the marketplace. So these are some of the things you want to think about when you're deciding how you and your company are going to be different. This little chart offers a fairly common and simplistic matrix of the various different value propositions based on price and benefits. So you can offer a product that costs more money but offers more benefits to your customers. That's the more for more strategy. The more for the same strategy is offering your customers more benefits, but for the same price as everybody else in your product category. So more value, but for the same price. More for less is a value proposition where you offer more value to your customers, but charge less money. That's a potentially very good value proposition. You're offering your customers more, but at a lower price. You can offer your customers the same value, same benefits, but for a lower price. So same benefits as all the competition that are out there, but you offer that at a lower price. Or you can choose to offer less benefits to your customers, but at a lower price. Those are just some, and again, this particular graphic is based primarily on benefits and price. There are other ways you can be different as well, but this is just a very simplistic way of understanding various value propositions. This is just a continuation of the previous slide. The more for more value proposition provides most upscale products or services. These are the better products and people are willing to pay more money for them. More for the same offers really high quality in the product category, but at a lower price or at the same price as everyone else. More for less is very often, if you can do this, if you can build a business model that allows you to do this, is very often a winning proposition. If you can give people more value for less money, that tends to be a winning situation. If you give somebody the same value but for less price, people feel like they're getting a really good deal. And there's lots of buyers who are very incentivized to purchase when they feel like they're getting a good deal. And less for much less involves meeting consumers' expectations for lower performance. They're willing to accept a lower performance if you give them a much lower price. So they're not all that concerned with the array of benefits that are inherent in the product. They're really price-driven consumers. They can be very satisfied by this kind of a strategy. At the end of the day, the company's 4P marketing mix strategy all must work collectively together, seamlessly, like the pieces of a puzzle, to support the positioning and differentiation strategy. All 4 of the P's have to come together to form a strategy that fits the positioning and differentiation strategy. You must maintain this position in the minds of consumers through consistent performance and communication. Any variability in performance or communication causes confusion in the minds of consumers, and confused consumers do not buy your product. You never want to confuse your target market because they will not buy your product. And the product's positioning strategy should be monitored carefully and adapted very slowly over time as the evidence suggests it should be changed. So, following the evidence and monitoring the performance, there may be small changes in your positioning strategy done strategically over time.